Hi everyone, it's nice to be here. It's nice to have you here. Today is the second part of the human design session. So today we're going to be talking about the centers and the authorities. If you weren't here last time, we were talking about the strategies and the types that are in human design. So with every type, let me start at the beginning. Human design is basically, for everyone that doesn't know it, it's a mix of astrology, chakras, I Ching, quantum science, and the Kabbalah. So it's a mix of all of these different insights that you can get into yourself. And it really helps when it comes to relationships with other people because it shows you who you are. So it helps you with the relationship with yourself. And it helps you to show you your potential and your challenges in life. So these are the two things that human design is really amazing for, and it also helps you to understand what works for you regarding a lot of generators really doing cardio work and exhausting yourself is something that really helps to fall asleep at night, for example. And the other thing that for projectors, for example, it is more that they can go to sleep without being physically exhausted, actually. To know these two differences, especially if you're in a relationship with either with a different type than you are, that can really help support the relationship. We're now going to be talking about the centers, and we're going to see how the centers interact with one another. So if you have defined centers, so colored in centers, or if you have undefined or open centers, so the white aspects, the white centers, then you're going to be interacting differently with the world. Yes, Brielle, this is my job. So I'm a yoga instructor, I'm a human design reader, but I more use it in the aspect of self-love. So I am a self-love coach, and I use human design to help people reach their inner self-love. So I have developed my own concept, which is the Opportyounity program, and I have created this journal. And in this journal, you have the opportunity concept, which is basically based on the 5 koshas in yoga. And the combination of human design really helps me to basically step into the challenges and the potential of a person much more quickly than sitting down like a therapy session and really talking it all out. I'm basically able to ask really targeted, really specific questions and to give really individual advice. And human design is really something that you do as a kind of experiment. So you try out everything that is suggested in your chart. And it depends on your level of self-growth. So how much work have you done on yourself already? And the more you have worked on yourself, so the more you have gone into things like mindfulness and socially imposed belief systems, inner child work, yoga, meditation, so nutrition, so all of these aspects, the more you have really found your balance in these things intuitively, the more your human design chart is going to resonate with you. If you have kind of shut yourself off from these things, or if you've been really influenced by your social surrounding, then it can very well be that you're not going to align so much with it because you've been so conditioned to believe something. So especially, for example, projectors, they have this challenge because 70% of the population are generators. The world has approximately 20% of projectors, 8% of manifestors, and 1% or less of reflectors. And if you look at all of these percentages, you can see that if we're 70% influenced by generators, we're going to think, oh my God, this is the norm. This is how everyone should be. And we don't really understand why we don't have that much energy. It's just very different. Like the whole system, the school system, the work system, everything is laid out for generators to work from 9 to 5 because there's so much sacral energy. And not everyone can keep up with that. So yeah, depending on how you have been conditioned or if you've been able to live freely and intuitively already by your parents, it all plays a role. So let's get right into that. So what I would suggest for everyone is to go to mybodygraph.com. There are many other websites out there, but this is a place where you can add all your details. What you will need is your exact time of birth, of course your place of birth and date of birth, but your exact time of birth. If you have it not so exact, like to the minute or to the second, that's okay for this part. But when we really get into the detail, into the gates and then the tones and colors and all of that, which we're not going to do here, but if you're really digging deep into these aspects, it's really important to have the exact time of birth. So add that all into that website and then you can see your chart. And we're going to be today talking about the centers, which are the triangles and the squares in your chart. Hi Tammy Projector, nice to have you here. And Kay, yes, absolutely. It really is. It is fascinating and it is never ending. The information that you get and the insights that you get from that is just super expansive. When I do charts for clients, then it just goes. I just can't stop. I just want to give so much information, and I still try to narrow it down so that it's not too overwhelming. And then once I work with them and I really go into the individual challenges, that's when it gets really interesting with the coaching aspects, because you have light aspects and shadow aspects. And when you look into the shadow aspects, that's when you're open to really look into your shadow aspects, because not everyone is open to dig into the dark sides and to accept them or to see them in the first place. So we tend to kind of block it off a little bit, but human design just opens it up. And what I personally love to do is I like to combine it with gene keys. I know that a lot of people that are doing gene keys or human design, they have challenges mixing both together. But for me personally, human design is a more logical approach, whereas gene keys is a more spiritual approach. And when I was reading my gates of the gene keys, I felt so seen and so inspired, and it resonated more with me to go into the gene keys. So depending on the client that is in front of me, I will go more into the spiritual aspects, or I would go more into the logical aspects. So what we're going to need is you will be able to see your authority, and you will be able to see the centers, the defined centers or the undefined centers. Thank you, Brielle. That's sweet. Yeah, Spirit, me too. I personally really resonate with it. Ooh, nice. Thank you for I will write that down. The wisdom keepers. Yeah, great. Yeah, then anytime you have any questions, go to your daughter and ask her to ask you questions, and you will receive the answers from your sacral and from the and So those sounds are really important for manifesting generators and generators as well, but especially with manifesting generators because it's connected to the throat. These are the sounds that we want. So if you have a manifesting generator kid or a generator kid, do not tell them to use yes and no. Let them use their instinctual sounds. Okay, let's get started. So we're working on the centers today, and we're starting at the top. So the triangle at the top is the head center. And the head center is here for inspiration. So if your head is defined, which means it's colored in, then automatically your ajna, so the triangle that is upside down, is also colored in, because that is the only connection that can connect the head to become defined. And for a center to be defined, it always has to have a channel in between two centers. And a channel means that one number in one of the centers is connected to another number in the other center, which makes a line. So the line is either black, red, or black and red, depending how it is defined. So it can be consciously defined or unconsciously defined. So we're starting with a defined head, And the defined head means that you are here to inspire others. So whichever center is defined in you, so that means colored in, this is something that gives you a consistent form of energy. And then it also depends how it is connected to the ajna, so to the other triangle below it, which channel is linking it. And that's going to be, when we get to the ajna, those are going to be questions that you ask yourself. But first, the defined head means that you have internal inspiration and you're here to inspire others, because when one of your centers is defined, you have that solid energy, which other people that are undefined are able to pick up from you. So when an undefined head meets a defined head, what can happen is that the undefined person is able to actually read their thoughts without them saying anything. And the undefined head as well is able to receive information not only from people with a defined head, but also from source more easily. So the other challenge that undefined heads have, though, might be that there is just so much going on in their heads. Because, there are just so many thoughts happening, because they have, maybe if they have the activated ajna, especially if they have the activated ajna, they can be influenced by that, and they can constantly try to answer all the questions that occur in their heads. So their mind just doesn't stop. And if you would ask a person with an undefined head and a defined ajna to sit down in meditation, that might be challenging for them. So you would have to look at the entire other rest of the chart. I just had a client yesterday where we had exactly this. And she is a generator, and she's a very active generator in several aspects. So she has all 4 motor centers activated. And she has an active arrow, so she's a very, very active generator, but she's not really using her physical energy that much. So for her, it would be important to use that physical energy to power through, to really exhaust her physical body. And because of other aspects in her chart, what was also interesting is that what for her would work really well would be a movement that is constant, where she doesn't have to think a lot about it. So for example, running, or Ashtanga yoga, where you have a fixed sequence and then you kind of fall into a trance, or just flowing dancing without really thinking about it. So all these aspects can really help an open mind with a defined ajna to clear your mind. But it also depends on your arrows, for example, or the other things in your chart. But yeah, undefined is here to get inspiration. My head and ajna are not connected by an active line. Yeah, Mark, your head is not defined, right? But your ajna, is it connected to the throat? So is your ajna defined? Because if your throat is connected to the ajna, that's also how you can get activated in your ajna. The head center is also a pressure center. So if you have a defined head, make sure that you're not pressuring yourself. So what is really important with human design is to understand that the head and the mind never make any decisions. Your decisions should always come from your authority and your strategy. So as I said, we've talked about the strategy already. You're in the last session, and today we're going to be talking about the authorities. And putting these two things together alone is going to help you so much in life. So if you only follow strategy and authority, you're already doing 80% of the work. So you don't really need to know anything else. Just strictly following your strategy and authority for a certain amount of time, and just see what happens. This would be an amazing experience. In a relationship with two people with open head centers, you would have to see the relationship chart, how it comes together. So if it is defined once you put the charts together, because it's possible that one has a gate on the top and the other has the gate on the bottom. So I'm not sure if you've put both of the charts together. Otherwise, if it's a relationship with open head only, I think it's actually a really nice, inspirational, I don't know, it's a really nice relationship to have, in my opinion, because you have this open-mindedness. So if you're aware of this and you are going into a more spiritual path, so I actually had that with my partner, with my previous partner, And I really enjoyed that connection because there was a lot of open-mindedness, a lot of acceptance, a lot of, wanting to grow together on an energetic field and getting inspired by the universe. But I'm not sure if that's for everyone. This was just my personal experience. You would have to really put the two charts together, because once you put both charts together, I mean, you can also do it just by looking at it. But if you put the two charts together, it makes things more simpler. And then you can also see how you're defined. So sometimes if all centers are defined within a relationship, it can be a bit limiting in some way, because you might feel stuck in certain instances. I have that with my two best friends, and when I spend a lot of time with them, I really enjoy it, because we just know what each of us wants, and we are very, very comfortable with one another. I, however, don't know how that would be in a relationship in a long run, because the more open centers there are, the more growth potential there is a lot of times. At least everything that is white in your chart, all your channels and all your gates, so all the numbers that are undefined, but also all the centers that are undefined. Everywhere where you're undefined, that's where you're going to face the most challenges, and you're going to have the most growth as well, because the centers and the channels and the gates that are defined, that is your energy, that is something that you often know and are aware of, whereas the other things you're not aware of, and that's how your environment influences you. When you have the open center, to not be so strict on yourself, to not put that much pressure on yourself that you have to find inspiration, or that you need to know everything. This is also going to be in connection to the Ajna. And the defined head can be used very well for conceptual ideas and creating things. So this is what the mind should be used for. It shouldn't be used to make decisions, as I said, because that's your intuition and your authority, your strategy and your authority. But it can be used in a strategic way, in a conceptualizing way. So now the Ajna is how you process data and how you store it. And that is the triangle below the head. So when that is defined, you're here to have your own personal outlook on things. So it is going to be, you see something like that, and that's okay for you. Whereas if you have an undefined head, you should be open to changing your opinions or to seeing different sides to something. You don't have to stick to something and be like, okay, this is my opinion and that's how it's going to be. But instead, you can really be flexible about it. And this is you. So the beauty about human design is really to show you who you are without judgment, and so you can accept yourself first and foremost. And once you start to accept yourself and who you are, you're going to also be able to explain that to other people and to just radiate that from inside. You process information in a very consistent way if you have the defined Ajna, and you can take information and transform it into a logical format. It is really a potential place of wisdom, but it can be a trap as well if you think that this is the ultimate. As I said, and I'm going to probably say that several times, at least until we've passed the Ajna and the head, the mind is not there to make decisions. So don't fall into a trap where you're making a pro and contra list. That is never the answer. So pro and contra lists, really, it never is the answer to anything, because that's when you're going to be using your mind instead of your intuition. Whatever authority we're going to be talking about, that is not the way, because that's when you're going to be thinking about something, you're going to try to justify things, you're going to try to make a logical decision, and that is not what we're here to do on this planet. With the undefined Ajna, it can be a bit challenging sometimes, because you don't have a consistent way of thinking. So this is like, if you have an opinion and you think this is how it is today, it might be different tomorrow, but also it makes you really capable of seeing different sides. So for example, if you're a judge, it would be really great to be able to see that a person reacted this way because of that, but you can also put yourself into the shoes of the other person because you can understand both sides of the coin. Don't put yourself under pressure here as well to stick to one viewpoint and embrace this flexibility that you have. Because this is your wisdom comes from seeing things from different perspective and doing that over and over again. So if the motto of the head would be I don't know, the open head would be I don't know, then the open ajna would be I don't care. Sounds a bit harsh, but yeah, maybe that makes sense to some of you. Oh yeah, absolutely, Mark. It really does. Like everything, the undefined and the defined both present a lot of opportunities because when you're undefined, you can really pick up the energies from others, which is really fascinating. And when you're defined, you're an inspiration to a lot of people because you're giving your energy, whereas the open centers, they take the energy, or they absorb the energy. And when the centers are undefined, so white, undefined, or open, so the open center is when there's no gate at all defined. And the undefined is when there is a gate, but the center is white. 1 or 2 or 3 gates, however many gates. As soon as there's one gate, then it's undefined. And when there are no gates, then it's open. So yeah, they're both beautiful. And what I love about it is just to understand who am I. So if I do feel a lot of head pressure, because my head is open as well. So if I do feel a lot of pressure from thoughts, then me stepping away from the group that I'm in right now helps me clear that, especially going into nature. So spending time in nature is such a valuable thing to do because that's where you can release your energy. Whenever you feel something from a defined center, which for you is undefined, so if you feel something from a center which is a defined symptom, but yours is actually undefined, it's going to be even more obvious in the other centers, like the emotional center, you're going to feel it a lot. The root center, you're going to feel it a lot, even though the head and the root, you feel it because there's a lot of pressure coming onto you if you're undefined. And once you step out of that environment, you're going to feel a difference. And then you're going to you come back into your energy because that is just not your energy. So it's also really valuable to understand where you're undefined and defined, because then whenever, like if you want to write your thesis or something for whatever topic you're on, then you can go to a cafe or a restaurant where there are lots of people, and you're going to pick up the thoughts, the information from the energies from other people around you. So you can actually activate undefined centers if you are undefined in certain aspects. Hi, Stitch. Human design is, I'm just going to do it a very quick recap so that we don't lose the flow here. But basically, human design is a way to understand your potential and to also understand your challenges in life. And it really gives a really intense and deep overview of these aspects without having to spend hours and hours and hours with a therapist where you explain everything. But it shows so much in your chart as well. And with the things that it shows in your chart, you're able to work on yourself in a more precise way. So basically for me, human design is like a compass. And with the compass, it can lead you into one direction and then you follow it, you try it out, instead of going into thousands of different directions and being confused and not knowing what exactly it is that you need to be doing. So if it comes to, for example, exercises or nutrition, let's stick to exercises, then you can already find out if flowing movements are more something for you, if you should focus on cardio, if you should really power yourself out, or if some more gentle movements are more for you. When it comes to nutrition, you can understand what type of diet is better for you depending on your type, but it's all an experiment. So even when I suggest something, then it is up to you to try it out. And it's also super important to be open to seeing your shadow sides and to wanting to improve. But because we're on this beautiful platform, I'm sure that 99.9% of the people here really do want to improve themselves. And this is when it really gets super interesting. Stitch, astrology is part of human design. So you have astrology, you have the Kabbalah, you have I Ching, you have the chakras, and you have quantum science, which all make up human design. And what I like to combine it with as well is the gene keys, as I've mentioned earlier. Human design was not developed, it was downloaded by Ra-Uru-Hu. So within an intense few days, he basically received that information from the universe, from source, from God, from however you want to call it. And he wrote down the whole concept. And I know this might be a challenge for some to believe or to understand. And honestly, if I would have told myself that 10 years ago, I would have just shaken my head and been like, yeah, you're crazy. But since I've been working with this with so many people, I can see, when you give a reading to someone, or when you talk to someone and they feel finally heard for the first time, or they feel like someone has finally understood what they are and who they are and what they are about. That's what I get with human design. That's what the glow in the eyes, yes, I'm ready to actually step into this and to really, because it resonates so much with people, at least the ones that are coming to me. Because if you're not, some people, I talk about this and they're just not open for that. And that is perfectly fine. But once you're interested in it, once it makes sense to you, it's just beautiful to dive deep into it. Yeah, Marcy, it is. I mean, at the beginning, I was really cautious about it, and I dipped my toes into it. And I'm someone that really likes to go deep. When I go into something, I go deep, and I really want to understand everything about it. And human design is just so vast, so it's going to take me probably until the rest of my life to really understand everything, if I'm lucky, because it's really, really vast, and because it's so individual to every human being. It's so unique to every human being, and whatever is activated or not activated in your chart, it can make a difference to other aspects that I'm talking about right now. I think it's important to make everything your own, and if I would just copy paste whatever Ra-Uru-Hu did, or anyone else, whatever. So my speciality is really to learn from many different teachers. So that's also what I did in India. I learned from several different yoga instructors, meditation instructors, breathing exercise instructors, all of these wonderful people, and I took what resonated with me at that time. And I always love to learn and to just evolve and develop whatever I'm doing. I think that's what makes a human design reader so important, the person that is giving you all that information. Because my brother personally had a reading with someone years back, and the person was only showing him his shadow aspects, and he wasn't empowering him. He wasn't showing him how he could even evolve into a different stage. And that is really destructive. He left after half an hour because he just couldn't take it. So the person that is giving you the information about your chart, it has to really resonate. So it can't just be anyone. It really has to be someone that you feel connected with. And once you found someone like that and you do want to dive deeper into your chart, then you can go on this journey. But yeah, the person for anything that you do, if it's a doctor, if it's a yoga instructor, if it's a coach, whatever it is, it always has to from a specific person. And I think the essence of it is always to make it your own. Stitch, to you as well, love and gratitude. Thank you. Now we come to the throat. So we are going to the defined throat. By the way, human design is also based on the chakras, as I've mentioned already. So we had the 7 chakra system, and the human design is based on 9 centers. And that is because some of the chakras just split into 2, because they kind of focused in onto more specific roles. What is interesting about the defined throat is that it can vary in quite significant ways, even the undefined throat. So The most important thing for a defined and an undefined throat, both of them, is to wait for the right timing. So it's best to, even if you're not a projector, to wait for invitation and to not just blurt it out. Otherwise, others might feel disinterested in what you have to say, and you might feel misunderstood, because the undefined throat might tend to just speak too much in some situations. So either they retract, they don't speak at all, or they speak too much. So these are the things that can happen with the undefined throat. The undefined throat has an amazing gift of really being able to speak for others. And you can also, what can happen that if you have an undefined throat is that when you go hang out with Australian friends, you might pick up their accent. When you go hang out with British friends, you might pick up their accent. So this is really a fun little thing that the undefined throat can do. And what I have personally also seen is that a lot of singers actually have an undefined throat, which I found quite interesting because it's actually not an energy that is constant. So I had always had the feeling that if you have a defined throat, then you have a constant energy stream, and that would be beneficial for singers. But apparently, I don't know. I've seen a lot of charts from musicians where the throat is undefined. You have a defined way of speaking if it's defined. So you have a specific way of speaking and communicating if your throat is defined and colored in. However, if you're operating from your mind, then you end up expressing BS. So really make sure that you operate from your authority and not from your mind. So you're going to hear a difference in a defined throat when they're speaking from their authority and not from their authority and not from their mind. No, the color doesn't have any significance per se. It's always the same color for the center, so the color doesn't change. Sarah, you can know more on a 15-minute free call with me if you want to know more regarding self-love and human design. Otherwise, there are books from Ra Uru Hu, from Karen Curry Parker, who has kind of made it into a more positive version of human design. But it is super complex. So if you're really just, if you want to dive deep into it, then yes, by all means go for it. But it has a lot of information, so it can be very overwhelming. And if you just want to have your own reading, then find yourself a coach or a person that you resonate with, which I've mentioned before, that is super important. I feel like there is some confusion. So the channel itself is what defines the center. So if you don't have a channel in between two centers, so in between a triangle and a square, for example, then the other cannot be defined. It's only when a line completely joins the two centers, that's when it gets defined. There are a few centers that look a bit confusing, so it can be defined. For example, if you look at the sacral and the throat, they can have an entire connection. The sacral and the G center can have an entire connection, but it's kind of around the corner, so you might not understand that so much or miss that. But yeah, that's how it gets defined. With the defined throat, it is also important to be aware that you don't tell people what to do. And if the throat is connected directly to a motor, that's when you're able to manifest things. So this is only with manifestors and manifesting generators. And then it is really interesting to look into the gate and the channel that actually defines it. Where does your energy, your manifesting energy, come from? That's when it gets really interesting. And when you have an undefined throat, what is also interesting is that you can actually... You have a talent for telling if someone is not telling the truth. So listen out, try to train your ear to that, because you're going to be able to see when someone is honest or dishonest just by hearing it in their voice. Now we step into the G center, which is the square that is pointing upwards, basically. The G center, you have an intuitive internal knowing, especially when it comes to what direction you should go into, and also when it comes to love. But this is a very challenging topic. So because of our socially imposed belief systems, this might actually be super crowded and clouded. Because you've maybe been told too many times that you're not good enough, or that you're not worth anything, or something like this. It doesn't have to be as dramatic as that. If you hear something over and over and over again, that's when you can clutter up your layers, your being, and you start to believe things that you're actually not. Okay, the defined G. So you have a defined way of being yourself. You usually, if you have not been manipulated by your surrounding too much, and you were able to really live your authentic self, which my parents thankfully allowed me to do, then you pretty much know who you are. You know what direction you want to go into, which took me quite a while, honestly, but I always tried everything out. But that's also because I have a 6-line profile, which, yeah, let's not get into that right now. And you understand, like, for example, for me, one of the main things that I want to accomplish in this lifetime, if that can even be a goal, is unconditional love. And that in my chart is defined. That is something that is important to me. And if you have a defined G, then you might be pressuring other people to go into the right direction that you believe is the right direction. So that can be a tendency in the defined G, because you're so clear on your direction. And if you have a defined G, but you have not yet successfully accomplished your mission in life, that can also be a challenge for the defined G, because we then put a lot of pressure on ourselves when that happens. And if you have a line directly connecting from the defined G to your throat, then you might be especially susceptible to criticism, and you might take it personal, and then you might express it. So this is what the defined, the G connection to the throat might happen, that you just express when you're criticized. The undefined G, that is, you are a wonderful chameleon of life. So you don't have a defined way of being, and you can be flexible in how you are. You maybe one day you want to dress up like a rock star, the other day you want to dress up like a princess, and that's perfectly fine. Just do whatever feels right to you. But know that the undefined G, your environment is super, super, super important. So let's just take the example of going on your first date, and the restaurant has a horrible atmosphere, the food tastes disgusting, the waiter is super rude, and your date is really charming. Well, you're going to pick up everything that is happening in your environment, and you're going to portray or reflect that onto your date. And that is really, the environment is a big, big influence for the open G. So be very careful where you are, in which environment you are. Be mindful that you feel comfortable and safe and happy, and surround yourself with the right people, because when you're with the right people, you're going to take up their traits. So if you decide you want to be more health conscious or something like that, then really find yourself people that are health conscious, because you're going to pick up that energy and you're going to become more like them. And you are really, don't beat yourself up about changing the way that you show up in the world. That is your beauty. You get to be like that. Like actors, for example, to have an open G as an actor is a great gift, I believe, because you can just pick up, like, especially if you're supposed to portray someone in particular, if you spend some time with them, you can just pick it up and you can become them. It's also a great tool for coaches, because they really get to understand what the other person is all about, and you can be very deeply sensitive, even to the point where, especially if you have even more open centers, but with the G center, with the open G center, it can even happen that you feel the energy of animals, and it's easy for you to fit in, and you really get people. There's more, but I think for the beginning, that's good for the open G. Now the heart, defined heart, you have the ability to make promises, and this is going to shock a lot of people, but 70% of the world approximately does not have a defined heart. Well, if it's defined, you may make promises, but only if it's according to your strategy and your authority. So this is the thing about undefined heart, the defined heart, undefined and defined heart. The defined heart has a lot of willpower, so when you set your mind to something, you're doing it. But be very vigilant as well, because the defined heart has, especially if this is your only motor, your only energy center. This is a motor center, by the way, I haven't said that yet. One of them, there are 4 motor centers, 4 energy centers that give you energy. And the defined heart has only a limited amount. If you have a project that you want to do, you have a lot of energy for that project. But once the project is over, that's when you need to take rest. So this is super important. So defined hearts, because they have so much willpower, it can be very pushy. Because for us, it seems so, we don't often understand why the other person doesn't have that consistency, that push through and something like that. As I said, 30% of the population is allowed and should be making promises and I'm saying this because the open heart, what can happen, or the undefined heart, what can happen is that you make promises, but it's really straining even on your physical body. So the heart center is connected to the thymus, to the gallbladder, to the heart, and to the stomach. And depending on which gate is activated or not activated, you might face challenges in these aspects. So you might want to look into those gates if you do have problems with any of these areas. So the spleen, the stomach, the heart, or the thymus. Sorry, not the spleen, the gallbladder. Open heart means completely without any numbers even colored. And undefined means you have 1 or more gates defined in a white heart center. Yeah, don't be too hard on yourself if you have an undefined heart. So don't push yourself, and don't think that you are not worthy if you're not accomplishing something. So this is really avoid making promises to yourself and to others. And if you have a defined heart, still be very wise into how you make your promises, but with an undefined heart, be even more wise if you ever do make promises. Follow your strategy and follow your authority, but you probably should not make promises in the first place. And don't fall into the trap of not being good enough. Give yourself a break. You're perfect already, you're perfect the way that you are. So we're all here for a reason, and we all bring our individual energies, and we can all inspire one another, and we can all support one another in different ways. Emotional solar plexus is the next one. And the emotional solar plexus is about emotions. So when it is defined, you're going to find your truth in your emotions. And you should trust your emotions. However, if you're making decisions, which is going to be the authority, so I can talk about the authority here, because as soon as the emotional solar plexus is defined, that is your authority. It trumps everything else. And once the emotional solar plexus is defined, you make decisions through your emotions, but you don't make decisions when you're at your happiest or your saddest. No, you basically ask a question. So should I take this job, for example? And you feel into that question when you're at your highest. So when you're super happy, you feel into that decision. When you're super low, you feel into that decision. When you're angry, frustrated, sad, whatever it is, all the kinds of emotions, you basically have a wave of emotions. You have ups and downs, and you have to ride your wave and see what feels good to you depending on your emotions. So you really need to learn to say, just give me a little bit of time to think about it, and take your time to think about it. Take your time to feel into that question. This doesn't mean that you can't make a decision about what it is you want for dinner right now, but as soon as it comes to more major decisions, do take your time. And be okay with being an emotional being, because once you accept yourself in these emotions, and once you really live your emotions, so if you're really able to be okay with them and to not try to shut them off and not allow yourself to be sad, not allow yourself to be happy, and all of these things. Once you actually allow yourself to be all of these things, you're going to, the people around you, they're really going to appreciate that. So you're more likely to face challenges if you're hiding or shutting down or trying to be something that you're not, instead of really stepping into these emotions and feeling them. No, Mark, it is only defined when the triangle itself is colored in. So the fact that you have one number makes it more easy for you to understand emotions, and you should look into that number and see what that is all about. And then you're going to understand how you interpret emotions and how you understand emotions for you personally. And Astrid, you have a red line from solar to throat, which means the red lines are unconscious, and you look at the channel that is connecting it, look at the gates that is connecting it, and then you're going to be able to see how you're expressing your emotions, because you're going to be expressing and speaking through emotions. Yes, I won't get into the channels itself today, because we're already digging really deep, but please look into that channel, Google it, and see what it says for you. The emotional authority, you're going to understand and know whenever you are making the right decision, when you're feeling a sort of calm. So you're probably never going to be at 100%, I'm sure, of this decision, but you're going to feel some sort of calm to probably 60, 70, maybe 80%. Try to feel a sense of calm, and also, like a little secret hack here, look at your motivation. So there is something, I'm not sure if you're able to see that in a basic chart. I hope you are, but I'm not sure. So you will be able to maybe see a thing called motivation. And when you're looking at that emotion, and look into what it means, because it can be guilt, it can be need, it can be desire, it can be hope, things like that. So it sounds really frightening at first, but if you look at the definition behind that, it's going to help you understand what you should feel once you're clear in your decision making. Thank you, Kay. Guilt for you. Interesting. My client yesterday also had guilt. Yeah, don't take that at face value, okay? This is not what it seems. Now, let's get to the undefined solar plexus. The undefined solar plexus, actually, guys, if you don't mind, I am going to finish the centers today, because I don't really want to rush through the authorities, but we're going to finish the centers today. So, the undefined emotional solar plexus is about, I am one of those, and I'm really pretty zen, and it's quite hard for anyone to disrupt my peace, but I also am very aware of what is happening within my body whenever I feel something, so it takes a lot to push my buttons. But the emotional solar plexus, when you're not aware of it, what can happen is that you take in the energy of the defined solar plexus and then you intensify it. So even though the other person is upset, you might be the one reacting, and then the other person is like, where did that come from? But what you're actually doing is you're taking up that energy and you're just reflecting it back at them, but you're reflecting it back usually in a more powerful, stronger way. Okay, what can happen with an undefined solar plexus is also that you can become like an iceberg, because you feel so many emotions whenever you're with people that you decide, okay, I'm just going to shut down. I'm going to not show myself in any emotional way, shape, or form. And it also tends to lead to trying to avoid to tell the truth, because when we do share our truth, it can happen that the other person reacts emotionally, or we feel their emotions, and that hurts us. So that's how we kind of try to protect ourselves. I had to work a lot on myself for that, but by now I pretty much always tell the truth, because I believe that this is something that is of utmost importance for self-growth and for my own personal goal of unconditional love, even though it is quite challenging sometimes. But this has really helped me to set myself that goal of being truthful and honest. And it is challenging sometimes, but worth it. What really helps is with an undefined emotional solar plexus is to recognize whatever happens in your body, wherever your emotions speak. Somatic healing work is interesting. Okay, now the next one, sacral, life force, energy. Those are all the generators out there and the manifesting generators out there. When that is defined, you have quite a bit of energy. I have actually met someone that was suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome. I know it's called differently right now, but I can't come to that name. So they were lacking that energy, but they had quite a few motor centers activated. So the sacral is also a motor center. The emotional solar plexus is a motor center, and the root and the heart, these are all motor centers. So they have a type of energy, a type of being able to really energize you in a certain way, shape or form. So the sacral, yes, defined. So that means that you have a lot of energy, so you can work from 9 to 5 if it is something that you love to do. It is super important for you to find things that you love to do, because that's when you're going to have this consistent energy. Otherwise, you're going to be frustrated most of your life. So please find something that you love to do. That's when you will have that energy. That's when you have this enveloping aura, this warm and energizing aura for all the non-sacral beings out there like me. That means if it is your authority, you're going to have a gut instinct. But we're going to get to that in a second. I'm just going to stick to the sacral right now, because this is not something that can stand by itself. So the defined sacral also speaks in these and tones. So this is really important. If you do have a manifesting generator or generator child, do not tell him to use yes and no. Let them use their intuitive language, because and is how they give their most authentic yes. And if it is not a hell yes, it's a no for the sacral beings and the sacral authorities. But I'm skipping ahead. But so you have a lot of energy. You also have a lot of sexual energy and fertility. And you have the need to regenerate life. So to reproduce, but to also give life to things around you, to people around you. And you're going to be able to really do that once you really live in your happy place, once you follow things that you're passionate and happy about. What you should look out for, though, because you have all of this energy, is that you power yourself out, exercise physically, and fall into bed exhausted. This is when you're going to have the best amount of sleep, when you really power yourself out and fall into bed exhausted. On the other hand, if you have an undefined sacral, you can pick up the energies of defined sacral beings. So when you have a manifesting generator or a generator in your life and you need energy, then you call them up and say, hey, can we meet? And then you can kind of, it's called borrowing a generator and stealing their energy to get your energy to finish your project. But be also mindful that you do need rest, and it is not your energy. So powering through and really following that, or just using up all of that sacral energy that you don't have, be careful about that, because you need rest and you need to decharge. So this is also important in relationships with a sacral being and a non-sacral being, that you should not go to bed at the same time. It's best to have time to separate the two and to go to bed a bit earlier, or to not sleep in the same bed at all. For me personally, that is not an option. I like to sleep in the same bed as my partner, but it's suggested to really take time apart and to decharge. So find ways to do that. And the amazing thing about that is, once you know that your partner is a sacral being and you're a non-sacral being, or the other way around, then you can also accept different aspects about them, because a non-sacral being goes to bed when they are not exhausted yet, and they will become more and more tired once they go to sleep, whereas the sacral being really needs to power themselves out first. So yeah, you can, as an undefined sacral, you can borrow the energy, but it is not your energy, so be mindful of that. And you might become addicted to sex because you just simply have a fascination with that when you're undefined in your sacral. It can happen, it doesn't have to happen, but especially if you have a partner that has a defined sacral, you pick up that energy, and it just, for an undefined sacral, you multiply it. Everything that is undefined, you multiply it, and you increase that energy. This spleen is about time, intuition, survival intelligence, and health. So these are the main things about the spleen, which is the triangle on the left of the sacral. And this can only be an authority when the emotional solar plexus and the sacral are not defined. Regarding making decisions, especially if you have the emotional solar plexus, but it helps for every authority to understand your motivation, because once your motivation and transference, actually, but let's just stick to the motivation. That's going to help you understand when you've actually come to the right decision for you. But it is quite complicated for the emotional authority sometimes. There are also other authorities that are quite complicated to understand when you have made a decision. So knowing your motivation can help. So the spleen, you have a consistent, instinctive voice that you can rely on for guidance, which is really handy. And you have an intuition and sense of well-being. So what can happen is that you might eat junk food for years, but when it really gets to your body, when there's really a big strain on your body, that's when you're going to stop it. You're going to go cold turkey, and you're going to say, this is it, enough, I need to take care of my body. Stephanie, yes, it does. It basically, the red is the unconscious side of your chart, and the black is the conscious side of your chart. So what is also interesting is when you're actually taking both of these things apart, because you might only be defined when the conscious and the unconscious comes together. So some centers are actually unconscious in your chart, unconsciously defined, and other centers are consciously defined, which makes a difference, because you're going to be more aware of the consciously defined centers than the unconsciously defined centers. So yeah, I've already mentioned this earlier, but I just want to mention it again just to be sure that everyone understood that. So the spleen can be an authority in and of itself, but if it is defined, I think I told Spirit this because she has a defined spleen as far as I know. It's always hard to remember who said what with just the names instead of having a face, but I'm trying. So if you have a defined spleen and it's connected to your throat in this example, for example, then it is not your authority if your sacral is defined or your emotional solar plexus is defined. If it is defined and this really is your authority, then you have a very, very, very quick intuition. So if someone asks you a question, your intuition speaks like this. It's super quick, and you have to be very vigilant, and you need to work with it quite some time to understand how your intuition or your spleen talks to you. If the centers are both consciously and unconsciously defined, Alison, then you're pretty aware of that center. Yeah, and also if you have defined and undefined, you can really go endless into human design, but what can also be interesting then is to look at how many times it has been defined in your chart, because what you're seeing in this image is really just, for example, even if your gate 26, for example, is defined in black, it could be defined in 5, 6, 7, I don't know how many times in your chart. So it can be defined many, many times in different planets, and every planet is going to activate each number in a different way. It's going to give it a different kind of energy. A defined spleen can be very attractive to someone with an undefined spleen. So what you need to be aware of is if you have a defined spleen, what can happen is you can be in relationships where the partner is in a bit of an addictive state because they feel addicted to your energy. And what can also happen, and this is exactly what I mean with human design, and that you need to be open to your shadow aspects, is that with a defined spleen, you might take advantage of that, and you might you might be a bit cruel to your partner in a certain way, but the partner is always going to keep coming back to you. So once you understand this dynamic, and once both parties are aware of this, which is also a really interesting thing that I saw in a couple not long ago in one of my clients where exactly this was happening. But because they were so open in change and in self-growth, they were really taking it in a positive way. And she became more aware of needing to be mindful of when he does something to her. And he would also be more mindful of these aspects and these dynamics so that, the addiction aspect would just not play a role. It would energetically be there. But because they're consciously aware of that, they're able to work with it. The undefined spleen is able to really feel other people's anxieties and physical pains as well. So, or also the fear of others. So it's something that they pick up, and that I have an undefined spleen, and when I give yoga sessions, then I'm actually able to feel the physical challenges in my clients. So when this has happened to me quite a few times, but I was aware of a knee hurting or a wrist hurting or something like that, and I then changed the position, or I then mentioned something, hey, maybe you want to put a pillow somewhere, and this is what the undefined spleen can do. It can pick up especially physical pains, or maybe you pick up the migraine of your mother or your father or something like that. And you have the challenge that you might be latching onto someone with a defined spleen. So always follow your strategy and authority here. And you might always be looking for a sense of security outside of yourself to feel better. So make sure to look inwards and to not try to latch onto things in the outside world, especially because you tend to amplify the fears and worries and insecurities of others with an undefined spleen. A lot of healers have an undefined spleen, as I said, because you can sense the especially physical aspects of another person. And the open spleen sounds hollow when spoken. So when you're speaking out of your open spleen, but it is not your authority, then your voice sounds a specific way. Now the root. This is the last center we're going to be talking about. And as I said, I'm going to be doing the authorities next Saturday. Yeah, Elizabeth, with an undefined spleen, you can feel the pains of others or the discomforts of others in the physical body quite easily. You can also have intuitive impulses like insights for others, not for yourself. Okay, the defined root is a pressure center. So the root is a motor center and a pressure center. So it can give you energy, but the defined root gives you energy in spurts. So it works on adrenaline, and it only works in spurts. And if you have a defined root, then you probably work quite well with adrenaline. There we go. So if you have, like pretty much everyone that I know that has a defined root, when you give them a task and they have that pressure to finish it, they work quite well with it. Whereas an undefined root, they want to get rid of the pressure, and they will do the task as fast as they can just because they want to get rid of that pressure. An undefined root also picks up the defined energy. So if someone is stressed, you will pick up that stressed energy from the other person, and you will multiply it. But with the defined root, you have you also have the pressure from below, as I said. So you do give yourself the pressure as well to accomplish things. And what you can do as an undefined root is to really notice whenever you feel that kind of stress and pressure, and then you can understand that this is not your stress, not your adrenaline. This is another person's adrenaline, and then you leave that energy and you decharge. Otherwise, you might feel anxious and you might feel the pressure to get things done. However, the undefined root is also going to be able to probably get things done more quickly than the defined root, but make sure that you understand that this is not your energy as well. So whatever is undefined, always make sure that you understand that this is not your energy and that you do need time to decharge and let that go. Especially for undefined people, being around stressed people is absolutely no fun. And then when an undefined root is surrounded or is with a defined root and they are stressed, the defined root is stressed, the undefined root is going to take that in and they're going to be the one exploding and making it worse. So it's not a good situation for anyone. So be very vigilant with an undefined root to stop whenever you do feel stressed, and to try to not be in that energy for too long. Otherwise you might end up with adrenal problems, and we don't want that, or burnout and things like that. Okay, that is it for today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you again for the lovely interaction, for the fun. Okay, everyone, I'm going to say have a wonderful day or a wonderful night wherever you are. It was a pleasure, and I hope to see you next time.
You are your opportunity. Yeah.